My name is Riley Carter, and I'm 28 years old. We're keeping it to family only this year. Hope you understand. That's the text my mother sent me 2 days before the annual Carter family reunion. I don't respond. Not immediately. I just stare at the screen while the late afternoon sun glints off the snow-capped Rockies outside my apartment in Colorado Springs. I'm still wearing my badge from the Department of Defense, still wired from a 12-hour logistics shift that rerouted medical aid to an overseas conflict zone. Family only. Huh. I put my phone down slowly, carefully, like it might explode. Behind me, my TV plays footage of a military press briefing I helped prepare. I coordinated the transport of 200 ICU kits, 7 ventilators, and 1 neonatal care unit across the Atlantic in under 36 hours. My name will never be on any headline, but that baby's heartbeat in Dakar, it exists because of me. Still in my mother's eyes, I'm not family. There's a silence in the room that feels heavier than it should. I sink into the kitchen stool exhale and take a sip of water that suddenly tastes like defeat. I try not to care. I tell myself, you're used to this. You've never been the one they posted about. You've never been the daughter they bragged on Facebook. But this is new. Not forgotten. Not ignored. Erased. It's not like I hadn't seen it coming. At Thanksgiving, my father joked in front of everyone Riley works for the government, but not the kind that makes any real money. My brother laughed so hard he spilled wine on my lap. No one apologized. I had just returned from a 6-week deployment support mission. But what does that matter when you didn't graduate from Yale or wear a white coat like your sister? I look around my apartment. It's modest, no marble countertops, no designer rugs, but it's clean, quiet, and filled with souvenirs from the places my job has taken me. A cracked compass from Ramstein Air Base. A thank you card in Arabic. A signed photo from a Navy crew I helped resupply after an engine failure. I'm not flashy. I don't wear labels. But I know who I am. So why does this still hurt? I scroll back through the text again. Hope you understand. Understand what exactly? That, because I chose a life of service over status, I'm now a ghost to the people who raised me. That family only means lawyers, doctors, and real estate agents. I lean my elbows on the table, my laptop's still open. A message blinks on the secure channel, OPORD 47-1, confirmed. Be ready. Transport ETA 0600. I click it open, jaw tightening. This wasn't just another shift. I've been tapped to lead a critical extraction coordination mission, airborne, high-level, and time-sensitive. It's not the kind of thing you get because someone likes you. You're chosen because you've proved over and over that you don't flinch when things go wrong, that you solve them before anyone else even notices the problem. Outside, a low rumble in the distance breaks the silence. I glance out the window. It's getting closer. I stand. In the hallway mirror, I catch a glimpse of myself, no makeup, dark circles, and old sweatshirt from ROTC days. I don't look like someone important, but in 6 hours, a helicopter will land outside the airstrip 10 miles from here. It'll carry a pilot who salutes me a manifest with my name on top and a briefing folder that calls me the lead. And in some mansion 3 states away, they'll raise glasses and toast a version of family I never truly fit into. Let them. Because I finally see it clearly. They called me a failure. But tomorrow, when the blades cut the sky open at dawn, they'll call me something else. They'll call me ma'am. I used to think if I just kept my head down and worked hard enough, eventually they'd see me. Growing up in Atlanta, Georgia, the Carter household had a very clear scoreboard, academic ribbons, scholarship letters, sports trophies, Ivy League acceptances. That was how love got handed out on a merit system my siblings were born to win. My sister Madison graduated top of her class pre-med. My brother Daniel pitched his way into a Division I baseball scholarship. Even my cousins were overachievers, law clerks, startup founders, and dental school prodigies. And then there was me. I didn't hate school, but I didn't love it either. I loved maps, logistics, systems. I loved figuring out how pieces moved to make something bigger work. I once spent an entire summer as a teenager organizing hurricane evacuation routes for imaginary towns just for fun. That didn't make it into the family newsletter. What did make it was how I graduated college without honors, how I chose to work for a non-prestigious branch of the government. How I moved across the country to Colorado for a role they didn't understand and never asked about. The only time my name came up at family functions was when someone needed a punchline. Riley works for the government, they'd say, with an exaggerated air quote and a knowing smirk, like I was doing spy cosplay instead of managing airlift routes that saved lives. At first, I tried to fix it. I sent updates, I called, I flew home, I showed up at every Christmas dinner, smiled through every backhanded compliment, nodded politely while they all exchanged career updates like stock reports. But after my third year with the Department of Defense, I started missing holidays. Not on purpose. Just, the missions got more intense, more real. I couldn't exactly leave during a humanitarian extraction, and when I'd apologize, they'd act like I'd missed a birthday party instead of coordinating relief efforts in earthquake zones. The shift was slow, subtle. At first, they teased. Then they pitied. Then they just left me out. The last time I visited home was for my grandmother's funeral. I arrived straight from a base in Nevada, still half-dressed in my field gear. Madison met me at the church doors with a strained smile. "Try to sit near the back," she whispered. "You look tired, tired." That was one word for it. I sat alone during the service. No one saved me a seat. No one asked how I was. My own father didn't even make eye contact during the eulogy. That was the first time I realized I wasn't just being overlooked, I was being erased. But I kept going. Because my job made sense. My team respected me. We didn't care where you went to school or who your daddy knew we cared if you could get the job done. Could you solve the problem when people were counting on you? Could you keep calm when everything went sideways? I could. I did. Again and again. And still none of that mattered to the people who shared my blood. They wanted gold-plated titles, letters after your name, designer handbags, and cocktail chatter about hedge funds. What I brought to the table, discipline, sacrifice, unglamorous hard work, was invisible to them. So I stopped expecting recognition. I stopped hoping the phone would ring. Until last week when Madison sent a group photo from Daniel's engagement party. Everyone was there. Mom, Dad, our cousins, our uncles, even some family friends. Everyone smiling, everyone matching, everyone except me. I hadn't even known about the event. No invite, no message. Just a photo. Like proof that they'd already moved on from pretending I mattered. And now the final blow being disinvited from the reunion altogether. The same reunion where 5 years ago they gave Daniel a standing ovation for getting hired at a hedge fund. The same one where Madison's boyfriend was introduced as the future of our family. The same one where I once brought a handcrafted mission coin from a Navy pilot I'd saved, and no one even asked what it was. I tried not to cry when I read Mom's message. Not because I didn't care, but because I still did. That's the hardest part. The ache of still wanting to belong even when you know better. But that ache has turned into something sharper, cleaner, not bitterness, clarity, because I know what's coming. Tomorrow before sunrise, a helicopter is landing with my name on the mission file. I've been briefed, vetted, and assigned. I'll be leading a critical transport op with military escorts and civilian evac coordination. It's not flashy. It won't make the evening news. But it's real. And when I step into that chopper, I won't be looking back at a family that failed to see me. I'll be looking forward to the people who do. The week before the reunion, the group chat came alive like wildfire. Photos of the vineyard venue. Shots of the invitation cards, gold embossed with a floral border. A long itinerary detailing wine tastings, boat tours, spa mornings, and a family trivia night. And then a message from Madison. Don't forget dress code is navy beige or emerald for photos on the lawn. Casual elegance only. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. It was like watching someone plan a wedding for a family I used to belong to. I wasn't even in the chat until 2 months ago. Madison had added me back after a long silence. No explanation, no apology. Just my name reappearing like a clerical fix. But now I understood. She added me back not to reconnect, but to exclude me in public. I never got the invitation. Not in the mail, not in my inbox, not even a sarcastic joke. Just silence. And now, confirmation that I wasn't wanted. Again. That sting, sharp and familiar, bloomed in my chest like a wound I thought had scarred over. Still, I typed something. Just one word. Noted. They didn't respond. I should have left it there. I should have let the silence hang like smoke, let them enjoy their curated illusion of unity. But part of me, still bruised, still small, needed to know why. So I called my mother. She picked up on the third ring, her voice tight. Riley. "Hi, Mom," I said. "Got your message. About the reunion." A pause. Then lightly, "Yes, I hope you understand." There it was again, that phrase, the bandage they wrapped around every act of cruelty. "I'm just curious," I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "Why am I not invited?" Another pause. She exhaled sharply. "Riley, it's not personal." I actually laughed. "Really? What would it be then?" "Logistics space on the lawn. You know how tense things have been?" she said, her voice pinched. "You've missed so many events. You don't stay in touch." It just felt disruptive. "Disruptive," I repeated. "To have your daughter show up, you know it's not about that." "No, I don't," I said. "Because I serve my country. Because I work 12-hour days for a department you've never bothered to ask about. And somehow I'm the embarrassment silence." Then, flatly, "Madison's worked very hard to plan this. She just wants everything to go smoothly." Madison. Of course. She was always the diplomat of the family. Charming, gracious, deadly in the most polite way possible. She didn't raise her voice, she used it like a scalpel. It wouldn't have surprised me if she made the call to keep me out. I didn't fit the aesthetic after all. I wasn't a magazine-ready success story. "Well, don't worry," I said, my voice thick. "I won't disrupt your photo shoot." She didn't stop me, didn't say she was sorry, didn't say she loved me. Just ended the call with a clipped "Take care, Riley." I sat there for a long time after, the phone still warm in my palm. That night, I went through an old box of family photos. One in particular caught my eye, the 2015 reunion, our last real one. We were on the dock at Lake Lanier. I remembered that day. How I'd flown home straight from a disaster recovery drill, jet-lagged and sunburned. I wore an old hoodie over my polo shirt because I forgot the dress code. In the photo, I was barely visible, half-cropped at the edge of the frame, awkwardly smiling while everyone else looked polished. I remembered how Madison had laughed and said, "Next time, maybe try a brush and a real outfit." Everyone laughed, even Dad. And just like that, my place had shifted, from part of the picture to background noise. I'd hoped it was temporary, that I could earn my way back in. But now it was clear. They didn't want me back in. Not unless I was someone else. And here's the twist they never saw coming: I was. Just not in the way they valued. My phone buzzed again. "A secure update, landing coordinates confirmed. Primary transport at 0530. Secondary unit rerouted per request. Clearance granted. Lieutenant CMDR Green will oversee extraction." I smiled, a small, bitter curl at the edge of my mouth. Lieutenant CMDR Green didn't oversee small things. This was big. This was visible. And it was mine. I couldn't be part of the reunion, but I would be part of something larger, something that mattered. Still, I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was anxious about the mission. No, that came easy to me now. What haunted me was the voice in my head, the one that still sounded like my mother's, like Madison's, whispering, "You're not enough. You're not us." That's the thing about being rejected by the people who shaped you. No matter how far you go, some part of you still aches to be invited home, even when home was never really home at all. The next morning, I went through my routine like muscle memory wake at 0430, shower, tie hair, into a tight bun field uniform, boots double-knotted, checklist cleared. By 0500, I was out on the tarmac, Colorado winds cutting sharp through the hangars. The Chinook helicopter landed in a roar of blades. It was beautiful. Heavy, competent, brutal in its purpose. Just like me. We loaded the crates, ran diagnostics, confirmed every name and supply package. I'd done this hundreds of times. And still there was something different this morning. something brewing in my chest like fire warming beneath armor. Before liftoff, I texted my supervisor, Colonel Ames, just confirming I'm still leading the handoff. His response came fast, like always, affirmative. They specifically requested you. I stared at that message. Specifically requested. I hadn't told anyone in my family that my work was finally being noticed at the highest level, that I'd been given a medal quietly confidentially for a classified recovery op last year, that I'd spoken in briefings with 4-star generals, that I was no longer just part of logistics, I was logistics. I hadn't told them because, why would I? They never asked. The helicopter rose above the Rockies, slicing through low fog and morning gold. Below us, pine trees lined the ridges like an unending guard. I looked out the window, and for the first time in a while, I didn't feel small. I felt removed. Like I'd crossed a threshold no one in that reunion group chat would ever understand. Still, my mind wandered. I thought about Daniel. He and I had been close once. Closer than I was with Madison. When we were kids, he'd sneak extra cookies to my room, shared his Game Boy, swore to take a beating from Dad if I ever got in trouble. I remembered one year at camp I'd been homesick and crying under the mess hall stairs, and he sat with me until the stars came out. But something shifted when we got older, when success started looking like numbers and titles. He joined the finance track, got Buff wore watches that could feed a family for a month, and I became the quiet one with a weird job no one could explain. I'd flown to his graduation from Columbia, alone, paid for it myself, sat in the back row and clapped until my palms stung. Afterward, he said, "You didn't have to come," with a half smile that made it clear he hadn't really wanted me there. And now he didn't even send a message when Mom told me not to come to the reunion. Not even a sorry. Not even a lie. We flew for 2 hours, landed at a restricted zone in Kansas. My boots hit the tarmac just as a convoy rolled in 6 Humvees and a staff SUV. A woman in full uniform stepped out. Her posture was straight jaw set like stone. "Lieutenant Carter," she asked. "That's me." She extended a gloved hand. "You've been requested for the Forward Logistics Unit. The general wants a briefing by noon." I nodded professional on the outside, but something inside me cracked open just a little. The general, as in top brass. Not just regional coordination, this was strategic command. And they wanted me. Copy that, I said, and followed her toward the SUV. But somewhere as we sped down the dirt road to the secure compound, I thought of a family trivia night where they laughed because I couldn't remember which aunt had married which real estate broker. How strange the things they valued. How blind they were to this. At the compound, I delivered the briefing. I explained the resupply protocol, the fallback procedures, the alternate extraction points. Every word came clean and exact. Every question was met with clarity, and when the general nodded, then shook my hand with a firm, "Good work, Lieutenant," I felt something uncoil inside my chest. Pride. Not the cheap kind. Not the Instagram-worthy kind. The quiet kind. The kind that builds in the silence of being dismissed for years and finally standing tall in your own damn boots. When I returned to the base later that night, I found a voicemail from Madison. Strange. She never left voicemails. I played it speaker low. "Hey, Riley. I guess I heard from Dad that you weren't happy about the reunion thing. I just wanted to say it's not personal. It's just, you're hard to include sometimes. Like we don't know what you do. It's complicated. Anyway, hope you're well." That was it. Not sorry. Not we miss you. Just a defense and a brush-off wrapped in a sugar coat. I didn't even reply. What would be the point? Later that week, I was given my next assignment, a high-visibility coordination mission involving civilian relief and military escort, one of the highest priority deployments in my career. The reunion was scheduled for the same weekend. I remember standing in the hangar bay, helmet under my arm, watching the sun rise behind the flight line and thinking, this is the choice they never gave me. Be seen in their world or build my own. They had made theirs, and now so had I. I wish I could say the deployment filled the void, that the adrenaline, the precision, the purpose erased the sting of being left out. But even out here, far from vineyards and photo ops, family found a way to haunt me. 2 days into the mission during a short stopover in D.C. For final briefings, I walked past a boutique cafe on my way to the hotel. My uniform still smelled like jet fuel and sand. My boots clicked sharply on the wet sidewalk. And that's when I saw them, Madison and Daniel, sitting at a table near the window laughing, matching beige trench coats, cappuccinos in hand, picture perfect like a J. Crew ad come to life. For a second I froze, caught between the shadow of who I used to be and the armor I'd built over the years. I could have walked past, could have turned away, but something in me needed to see what they'd say. So I pushed open the door. The little bell above rang light and mocking. Madison looked up first. Her smile didn't falter. "Well," she said coolly, "look who's finally back from saving the world." Daniel raised his brow. Didn't think they gave vacations to government shadows. I stood there still, my face unreadable. "It's not a vacation." "Could have fooled us," Madison said, sipping her coffee. "Didn't you get the memo family time means showing up? Not just disappearing for years, then resurfacing with war stories." Her voice was light, but the venom lay just beneath it. I glanced at Daniel. "You really didn't think to text me?" He shrugged. "We figured you were too important for small stuff." There it was. Too important for small stuff, and yet never important enough to invite. I took a breath, calm and low. "You didn't even send me the invite." Madison blinked. "You would have just said no. Or shown up in camo." They laughed. The kind of laugh that pricks under your skin like tiny needles. I wanted to yell. I wanted to shake them and scream. "You have no idea what I've done for this country, what I've seen, what I've buried." But I didn't. Instead, I turned, walked straight out into the cold, because nothing I said would ever be enough. Not for them. Not when their world was wrapped in curated perfection. Back at the hotel, I sat on the bed and stared at my boots. So many hours, so many missions, so much earned. And still I couldn't shake that feeling that I was the outsider in my own bloodline. I checked my phone. No texts, no calls. Just a notification that the reunion photos had been uploaded to the family drive. I tapped the link. There they were, Daniel in his navy sweater and Madison in emerald. All the cousins, the kids, Dad in his sports coat standing center with a whiskey glass. And no empty space for me. Not even a mention. Just smiles. Perfect. I closed the file. It wasn't just that I wasn't missed. It was that they didn't notice I was gone. That night, I dreamt of my childhood room, except in the dream the furniture was gone. My bookshelves were bare. My name had been scraped off the door. The house wasn't mine anymore. I was just visiting a life that had forgotten me. I woke up at 3:17 a.m., the sheets damp with sweat. Something in me cracked, not like a bone breaking, more like a dam giving way. I sat on the edge of the bed and cried deep, ugly sobs that came from somewhere ancient in my chest, the kind I hadn't allowed myself in years, not since basic, not since Afghanistan, not since losing Kevin in that compound collapse. All this time I thought being strong meant not feeling it. But maybe strength was what you found after everything fell apart, after the uniform came off, after the titles were stripped away. Just you, raw, rejected, and still breathing. By sunrise, I'd decided something. I couldn't keep proving myself to people who refused to see me. I needed to start showing up for me, and I knew exactly how to start. I reported back to base that afternoon, composed on the outside hollow on the inside. Everything around me still functioned with military precision. The clipboard check-ins, the brief nods of respect from subordinates, the quiet buzz of classified coordination in sterile briefing rooms. But something in me had dimmed. It wasn't just about the reunion anymore. It was about being erased. Again, I'd fought for years to carve out a space where I mattered, but no matter how far I flew or how many commanders learned my name, I still came home to silence, indifference, shrugs from the people who were supposed to know me best. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay on the cot in my temporary quarters, staring up at the ceiling tiles, listening to the hum of the vent system. A storm rolled in sometime after midnight thunder, low and slow, like the earth was groaning. In my mind, I went over every word Madison had said, every time she brushed me off, every sideways glance from Daniel, every moment where I'd bent over backwards to attend support contribute and they still labeled me the problem. And then I remembered Mom, her voice in the voicemail from weeks ago. "It's just hard for others to connect with you, Riley. You've chosen such a different path." She didn't mean harm. That was the worst part. In her eyes, it was a kind dismissal. She thought I was okay, strong, independent, unbothered. She didn't see the cost, didn't see the years I spent wondering what was wrong with me, didn't know I still sometimes Googled things like how to feel close to people who don't care about you or why am I always the outsider in my family. And worst of all, there was a part of me that believed them, that maybe I really was too much, too quiet, too serious, too strange. The next morning, I walked into the gym, wrapped my hands, and hit the bag until my knuckles ached. Jab, jab, cross, not strong enough. Jab, cross, hook, still not there. Uppercut, uppercut, elbow, harder. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My shoulders burned, my heart pounded, but nothing shook the pain loose. I leaned against the wall and slid down to the mat, my breathing ragged. Maybe I was never going to feel at home. Maybe I'd always be somewhere in between, too military for my family, too emotional for the service, too ambitious for friendships built on wine nights and group chats. I didn't belong anywhere. I stared at my hands, calloused, steady. They'd carried supplies through war zones, bandaged wounds, held lives together when others fell apart. Why weren't they enough? Why wasn't I? That night, as I walked back to the barracks, I passed a new recruit in the hallway. Barely 19. Nervous. Eyes darting as I approached. He saluted too early. "Ma'am." I returned it gently. "At ease." He glanced at my shoulder patch. "They say you coordinated the Kabul airlift." I paused. "I was part of it," I said softly. He nodded, wide-eyed. "That was incredible. Everyone says you're a ghost in the system. Like the quiet power behind the curtain." I smiled. Just slightly. "I'm just someone who doesn't give up." He looked like he wanted to say more, but I moved past him. It wasn't a compliment I'd expected, but it landed like a life raft in a storm. That night, I lay in bed and thought about that phrase. Quiet power. It stuck with me. And the more I turned it over in my head, the more I realized maybe that's what I was meant to be. Not loud, not flashy, not applauded in family albums or brunch tables, but undeniable. The kind of force that shapes things behind the scenes. That shows up when no one else will. That gets remembered not for how loudly she spoke, but for how she acted when no one believed in her. I wasn't born to fit into their world. I was born to build my own, and just like that, something shifted, not like a breakthrough, more like a slow, steady click. I wouldn't fight for scraps of approval anymore. I'd lead, quietly, powerfully, my way, and they'd see me again, not when I begged for it, but when the sky opened. Because the next mission, it wouldn't just be critical, it would be visible. And for the first time, they would be the ones looking up. After years of keeping my head down and just doing the work, I finally understood it wasn't weakness to want to be seen. It was human. But I wasn't going to chase validation anymore. Not from Madison, not from Daniel, not even from my parents. They'd made their decision over and over again. And I was done asking to be let in. Instead, I was going to double down on who I already was, a woman capable of pulling off operations most people couldn't even imagine. Not for the medals, not for the attention, but because this time the mission would be mine. A few weeks later, the call came in. Joint Task Command wanted me to take lead on a sensitive interagency operation, a high-clearance multi-branch extraction protocol being deployed in the Pacific. No media coverage, just results. I said yes without hesitation, but I also added one thing: I wanted my own team. People I trusted, people who didn't care about headlines. People like me, quiet soldiers. I spent the next 2 weeks in nonstop prep mode. Wargaming logistics, vetting satellite communications, reviewing personnel files until my eyes blurred. There was no time to mourn what I hadn't been given, only to build what I could control. At night, I ran ops rehearsals in my head the way most people count sheep. During the day, I mapped out every contingency. By the end of the second week, I could recite the extraction protocol backward in my sleep. It felt good to be needed again, to feel useful. But there was still one nagging thought I couldn't shake. I hadn't called home in over 2 months. I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that they wouldn't notice, that their world kept spinning whether or not I picked up the phone. But some small, aching piece of me still wanted to hear my mother's voice, to hear her say she missed me, that she was proud, that maybe she'd been wrong. So the night before deployment, I called. The phone rang twice before going to voicemail. I waited. No callback, not even a text. I left no message. Because really, what else was there to say? We deployed at 0600 the next morning. The operation was high stakes, high risk, and utterly thankless. Just the way I liked it. For 10 straight days, I coordinated flights, rerouted intel, and led a team of 16 across 3 islands under blackout communication. On the 12th day, we completed the mission. Flawlessly. The commander in charge shook my hand and said, "We've never had this level of precision. How the hell did you do it?" I looked him dead in the eye and replied, "We practiced being invisible until it worked in our favor." He laughed. I didn't. That night back in the tent, I finally opened my encrypted tablet and saw a backlog of messages, briefings, summaries, reports. And one email with a subject line I didn't expect: Latine Spencer urgent recognition request. Immediate response requested. I clicked. Inside was a notice from a Pentagon representative. They were requesting my presence at an upcoming national recognition ceremony in Colorado Springs, an event honoring unlisted leadership involved in covert operations that had directly prevented escalations overseas. The keynote, the Secretary of Defense. There were only 5 honorees. I was one of them. I sat there for a moment staring at the screen. Not because I was surprised by the honor, but because for the first time it wouldn't be hidden. I was going to be seen not because I elbowed my way in, but because I'd earned my space in a room most people never knew existed. And suddenly, I thought of Madison again, of the way she once joked, "Are you sure they didn't just make up your job?" and Daniel's classic, "So what is it you actually do again?" This time they wouldn't need to ask, because it wouldn't be just a vague title. It would be my name read aloud, on stage, on a screen, with military brass in the front row and cameras rolling for documentation. A part of me wanted to send the invitation to the family group chat, just to see what they'd say. But I didn't. Because this moment wasn't for them. It was for me. Still, I knew that if fate had any sense of irony left, it would find a way to make sure they knew. And as it turns out, fate had one final surprise. 3 weeks later, I stood on the tarmac at Peterson Space Force Base, watching the blades of a Black Hawk slow to a crawl after touchdown. My boots clicked against the concrete as I approached the officer who'd radioed my arrival. A clean-cut Air Force lieutenant handed me a sealed folder marked with the Department of Defense insignia and said simply, "Ma'am, we're ready." It wasn't lost on me, the weight of those words. "Ma'am, we're ready. Not where have you been, not why are you here, not even what do you want, just, we're ready." I boarded the chopper in full-dress uniform, my bars gleaming my nameplate straight. Beneath it, a newly minted award ribbon glinted faintly, one very few people even recognized. The ride to the Colorado Springs Convention Center took less than 15 minutes. And yet it felt like crossing a lifetime. I kept thinking about the last family reunion, the folding chairs in my cousin's backyard, the smell of charred burgers, the sticky plastic tablecloths, the way Madison had called me the family dropout in front of everyone like it was just a funny little fact. I hadn't said a word. Not then. But now I didn't need to say anything at all. When I arrived at the venue, I was ushered through a back entrance. Security was tight: scanners, ID checks, even facial recognition at certain points. But every door opened for me. I'd become someone who didn't wait for permission anymore. Inside the ballroom was all polished floors, polished shoes, polished protocol. Brass everywhere. And behind the stage, a banner read, "In quiet valor, Honoring the hidden hands of national security. I almost laughed. Hidden hands. That had always been me. We rehearsed the ceremony once just enough to know where to stand, when to salute, how to receive the award. And then, at 1600 hours sharp, the real thing began. Rows of seats filled with officers, dignitaries, civilian leaders, cameras mounted at every angle for internal broadcast. A string quartet played something delicate and proud as names were read off one by one. I stood backstage, spine straight, hands steady. Then I heard it, Lieutenant Riley Spencer, U.S. Army, for extraordinary leadership in interagency coordination and for service that directly safeguarded hundreds of American lives. My cue. I stepped forward. Applause rose around the room like a wave, not thunderous but intentional, measured, respectful, powerful. As I approached the podium, I looked out briefly into the crowd, expecting to see only uniforms and brass. But then I saw them, my family, Madison, Daniel, my parents, third row, right side, frozen. Madison's mouth was slightly open, like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring like someone watching a stranger. My mother's hands were clasped in her lap so tightly her knuckles had gone white. I didn't break stride, didn't blink. Just took the stage, accepted the award, saluted the secretary, and took my seat beside 4 other honorees. They didn't call attention to the family in the crowd. They didn't need to, because I saw it in their faces. Recognition. The same kind I'd spent years craving and then learned I didn't need to survive. The ceremony ended with the quartet playing a slow, reverent piece. Then came the mingling, the handshakes, the photos. I kept my distance, but I knew they'd find me. And sure enough, 15 minutes later, I heard my sister's voice behind me. Riley. I turned. Madison stood there in heels, too tall for the event makeup, a little too heavy. But she looked unsure, like she'd lost the script. You didn't tell us, she said. I looked at her evenly. Didn't know I had to. Mom stepped up next, her voice trembling. We saw your name in the program last minute. Daniel pulled it up on the Pentagon site. We had no idea. I nodded. I figured. Silence stretched between us like tension wire. Then Daniel, always the deflector, offered a half smile and said, You clean up pretty well for a failure. It was supposed to be a joke, but no one laughed, not even him. I took a slow breath. I've stopped measuring my worth in family votes. Another silence. But this one felt different. Not cold, just unfamiliar. Like maybe for the first time they didn't know where to place me. And that was fine. I'd never fit their boxes anyway. Before they could say anything else, one of the event organizers came up behind me. Lieutenant Spencer, the press rep, wants to confirm your travel plans for the next assignment. Should I send them to your detail? I nodded. Yes, thank you. I glanced at my family one last time. I have to go. They nodded too slowly, like they weren't sure what else to do. I turned and walked away. But just before I reached the door, I heard Mom's voice again. Quiet, hesitant. Riley. I turned back. She didn't say anything else, but her eyes said enough. Pride, maybe even regret, but most of all, recognition. It wasn't everything, but it was something. And this time, I was strong enough not to need more. 2 days after the ceremony, I got a message through my encrypted line. My next assignment was greenlit. A 6-month classified rotation overseas. I felt steady. Not excited, not afraid. Just grounded in a way I hadn't been in years. The Colorado Springs ceremony had shifted something in me, not because of the medal, not because of the secretary's handshake, but because I had finally stood in full view. No invisibility cloak, no apology. And they saw me. I let that be enough. But then came a surprise I wasn't expecting. A letter, handwritten, folded neatly in a lavender envelope. No return address, but I recognized the script instantly. Madison. I opened it on my balcony, coffee in hand, the early morning sun filtering through the pine trees. Riley. I've never said this before, and maybe it's too little too late, but I need you to know something. You didn't fail us. We failed you. You were always the strongest one. I just didn't understand it then. And when you stopped showing up, I thought it was just you being cold. I didn't realize we'd made it impossible to feel welcome. The truth is, I envied you. You weren't trying to impress anyone. You just went after what mattered to you. I still don't know how you did it. I hope we talk again soon. Mads. For the first time in a long time, I cried. Not from sadness, but from something closer to release. There was nothing in the letter about changing everything. No plea for forgiveness, no neat little bow. Just acknowledgement. And that was enough. I folded it carefully and placed it inside the side pocket of my deployment bag. Not as a keepsake, but as a reminder, healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it starts with a sentence scrawled in ink. 2 days later, I boarded another chopper, this one bound for a forward operating base outside the country. Same boots, same uniform, but a different woman. Because this time, I wasn't running from rejection. I was walking toward purpose. The base was hot, dusty, and sparse. No press, no fanfare. Just long days and longer nights filled with mission briefs, supply runs, and classified work. Exactly the kind of silence I'd always preferred. But on the 10th night, I received an unexpected message over the secure line. Your family sent a care package. I blinked. That had never happened before, not once. Inside the box, protein bars, socks, a paperback novel I'd once loaned Daniel as a teen. And beneath all that, a small photo album. I thumbed through the pages carefully. Each photo had been captioned. Reunion snapshots this time, with a space left intentionally blank. A small sticky note read, "We saved a spot for you next time. Not because we expect you, but because we finally know we want you." I closed the album and sat with it in my lap for a long while. It was strange. After all these years of being overlooked, erased, misjudged, it wasn't revenge I felt. It was quiet peace. Not the loud, triumphant justice you see in movies, but something real. Earned, not given. I didn't call them back immediately, didn't write, didn't gush. That wasn't me. But I did send a message through encrypted line with just 4 words. I saw the album. It was enough. Because real connection doesn't always start with conversation. Sometimes it begins with someone finally making room for you, and you choosing whether or not to walk in. Later that week, one of the younger soldiers on base, a 23-year-old with fresh boots and tired eyes, asked if I ever regretted my path. If you could trade all this for a regular life, she asked, would you? I thought about it, about what I'd lost, about what I'd missed, and about everything I'd gained in return. I don't regret becoming who I was meant to be, I said. She looked puzzled. Even if people don't understand it, especially then, I smiled. Because understanding wasn't the point. Standing in your own truth was. Even if it takes years. Even if no one claps. Even if you have to land your own damn helicopter. And in that moment, surrounded by sandbags and stars, I felt more seen than I ever had in a ballroom. Because I wasn't just visible now. 6 months later, I returned to US. Soil with sand still in my boots and a renewed stillness in my heart. I'd completed my assignment without headlines, without a single press release. My work remained as always classified, unknown to the public, unspoken by design. But for the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt solid. The airport terminal buzzed with families greeting each other. A toddler ran past me with balloons tangled in his fists, squealing something about grandma. I waited by the sliding doors for my ride. A black SUV pulled up, not military issue, not government either. Just familiar. Madison stepped out. She wasn't wearing makeup this time. Her hair was pulled into a low ponytail, and her hands gripped the steering wheel like it was anchoring her. She didn't speak right away. She just opened the back door and said softly, "If you're okay with it, I'd like to take you home." That word home hit me sideways. I studied her face for a second longer, then nodded. The ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. We passed pine trees and old gas stations and a stretch of road I used to jog in high school. The city looked the same, but I had changed too much to pretend everything would go back to normal. And I didn't want it to. "Mom's making dinner," Madison said finally, her eyes fixed on the road. She didn't want to assume anything. But I think she made your favorite, the lemon chicken. I let out a quiet laugh. She remembered that she remembers a lot, Madison replied. Even the stuff she never said sorry for. Silence again. But this one was heavy in a different way. More like reconciliation in process. We pulled into the driveway just as the sun dipped behind the trees. The house looked the same, white siding hydrangeas the mailbox that leaned a little to the left. But there was a new doormat out front. It read, "Welcome back." I paused. Just a moment. Long enough to feel it. Then I walked up the steps, Madison trailing close behind. Inside, my mother stood in the kitchen wearing an apron that didn't quite fit anymore. Her hair was gray at the edges and she looked older than I remembered. Softer. She turned, wiping her hands on a towel, and froze when she saw me. We stared at each other. No speeches, no apologies. Just presence. "I made extra," she said at last, her voice a little too casual. I noticed, I replied with a small smile. Dinner was quiet at first, until Daniel walked in with his kids. Then the table filled with noise crayons, toy cars, someone spilling juice and blaming the dog. And suddenly, I saw it. This family I'd once longed for. It wasn't perfect. It never had been. But maybe they were learning too. Maybe we all were. After dinner, Madison and I stepped outside. The air was cool and cicadas hummed from the trees. "I still don't get it," she said, arms folded. "How you did all of that? Alone." "I wasn't alone," I said. "Just quiet." She nodded slowly. "I think we mistook your silence for weakness." I smiled. "Most people do." She looked at me sideways. "But you don't need our approval anymore, do you?" "No," I said. "I came back because I chose to, not because I needed to." Madison exhaled, then reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a framed photo, one I hadn't seen before. It was the family reunion, the one I'd been banned from. But this time, the photo had been altered digitally or physically, I couldn't tell. A space had been left open, right in the middle, and in the gap, someone had placed a small name tag. Riley Spencer. It was subtle, but it was deliberate. Madison offered it to me. I know it's not enough, but it's something. I took the frame and held it for a moment. "It's not about the photo," I said. "It's about who finally saw me in it." She nodded. "You're not just part of this family anymore. You're the example now." I didn't say anything, but in my chest something loosened. That night before I left, Mom hugged me. Not a hesitant, awkward pat, but a real embrace. She didn't say, "I'm proud of you." She didn't say, "I'm sorry." But she whispered, "You always were the brave one." And that was enough. As I drove away in the same SUV Madison had brought me in, I felt no need to turn back. No bitterness. No final words. Just peace. A week later, I stood once again at a tarmac ready to board for my next rotation. Same uniform, same boots. But now there was a name stitched on my gear that no one could erase. Mine. And as the chopper lifted slicing through the Colorado sky, I heard those words again in my mind. "Ma'am, we're ready." Only this time I said them to myself. Because I was ready too. Ready to serve, to speak, to stand. Not for recognition. Not for revenge. But for the quiet power of becoming. And no matter what anyone said, family, strangers, even the version of myself I once left behind, there was no denying who I was now. Not invisible, not rejected, not erased, seen, chosen, worthy, and soaring.